Friends, I hope you liked our story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to receive updates first. My name is Sheila. I have a 15-year-old blind daughter, and I was very distressed because of her condition. I wandered from place to place seeking help, but nothing worked. One day, my sister-in-law told me about a famous tantric. I took my daughter to the 70-year-old tantric, and he said, "Keep your door open tomorrow evening. I will bring medicine for your daughter." I followed his advice and left the door open. It was 6 in the evening when the tantric arrived at our house. He took out 2 packets from his bag and said, "Mix this in water and drink it. After this, your daughter will be able to see." We happily mixed the medicine in water and drank it. As soon as we drank it, darkness engulfed us, and we lost consciousness. When we regained consciousness, the ground slipped from beneath our feet as we saw our daughter in a very terrible state. It had been 4 years since my marriage, but I still didn't have any children. I had consulted many doctors, but nothing worked. When the 5th year of my marriage began, I got pregnant. It was a huge joy for me, and my happiness knew no bounds. I had made countless efforts to have a child and undergone several treatments. Through it all, my husband stood by me and supported me. My husband was a very kind person. He always took care of me. In my in-laws' house, I was often taunted for not having children. They considered me barren. These comments troubled me greatly, and I had reached a point where I lost all hope. I even told my husband that he could marry someone else if he wanted, as I wouldn't be able to give him the joy of becoming a father. But he would ignore my words and say, "If God wants us to have children, we will." It's not certain that a second marriage would give me children, and if I still don't have children after that, what will I do? Finally, God answered my prayers. A little angel was born into our home. My husband and I were overjoyed beyond words. I would spend the entire day holding my daughter close to me. My husband would long to hold her, as I barely let her leave my arms. I always dressed my daughter in the most expensive clothes, and everything she needed was available at home. Her childhood was wonderful, and she turned 4 years old. However, she still hadn't started seeing. Whatever we did in front of her, she wouldn't notice. Since I was Pinky's mother, I would often ignore these things, but the women in the neighborhood would repeatedly remind me that my daughter was 4 years old and still couldn't see. All the children in the neighborhood who were born around the same time as my daughter could see clearly. These remarks filled me with fear. But I hadn't shared my pain with anyone yet, because I lived in a community where any kind of imperfection in a person became their identity. The very thought of people calling my daughter blind made my entire body tremble. Thinking about this constantly made my heart sink. My husband noticed my distress and would often ask, "What's the matter, Sheila? Why do you always seem so worried?" When he asked me this, I broke down and started crying uncontrollably. I said, "Mukesh, our daughter is now 4 years old, but why is she still unable to see anything? The women in the neighborhood scare me and say strange things, suggesting that our daughter might be blind. I'm starting to feel the same because she's grown so much, yet she can't see anything." He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Sheila, what's wrong with you? You've truly gone mad. You've been enduring this all alone for who knows how long. If you had told me, we could have found a solution together." I immediately asked, "So tell me, what solution have you come up with?" Mukesh replied, "I won't go to the office tomorrow. The 2 of us will take our daughter to a doctor. There are excellent eye specialists in the city, and you'll see that our daughter's eyesight will be restored, and she'll start seeing. The doctor will do a full checkup and tell us what the problem is with our daughter." Hearing Mukesh's words made me happy, but I still had a lingering thought in my mind. I said, "Mukesh, what if the doctor says that our daughter was born blind? What will we do then?" Mukesh calmly replied, "Then we won't do anything. We'll simply thank God for blessing us with a daughter. You know how many years we waited to have a child. We longed for her, and now that she's here, if she has any shortcomings, it's all part of God's will. We must accept God's will in every situation." I agreed with my husband's words and nodded. Then I stepped out of the room and got busy with kitchen work. While working in the kitchen, I kept worrying, thinking about the possibility that my daughter might indeed have been born blind. The entire day, I didn't eat anything because of the tension, and I couldn't sleep properly at night either. I loved my daughter deeply and constantly worried about her future. I wondered how she would get married if she remained blind. Who would accept her? I pleaded with God to let my daughter see with her own eyes and save her from any major hardships. When I woke up in the morning, I had a terrible headache. My eyes were swollen from crying. Going to the hospital felt like heading toward a great disaster. It was 11 a.m., and my husband said, "I've gathered all the information about the best doctor in the city for our daughter. Get ready quickly and prepare Pinky too. We're going to see the doctor." My daughter was very well behaved and never troubled me. She always did what I asked, even though she couldn't see. She played with her toys by feeling them and didn't throw tantrums like the other children in the neighborhood. I dressed her in a lovely frock, and she looked absolutely adorable. Once we were ready, we went to see the doctor. The doctor conducted a thorough examination of my daughter's eyes and said, "There's no major problem with your daughter. As she grows older, her eyesight will also improve. Some children have weak vision, which is why it takes them longer to see clearly. Don't worry, your daughter's eyesight will return gradually. For now, I'll prescribe some medicine that will help. Additionally, we have several facilities here. You can enroll your daughter in our eye center for training, and you can bring her here every week. She will slowly begin to see." Hearing the doctor's words felt like a heavy burden had been lifted off my shoulders. I was overjoyed and saw a glimmer of hope. I asked my husband to take us to the shopping mall so I could buy new clothes for Pinky. Whatever clothes Pinky chose, I got them for her. She also picked out a few toys by feeling them with her hands. Since Pinky's birth, I had stopped paying attention to myself. I didn't care about what I wore or how I looked. My only concern was my husband's and daughter's happiness. But now I started feeling a bit happier because the doctor had eased some of my worries. Time passed, and we continued following the doctor's advice, spending a lot of money on Pinky's treatment. However, as my daughter turned 7, she still hadn't started seeing. I told Mukesh, "We will no longer take Pinky to this doctor. We'll find another, better doctor for her." We didn't leave any doctor in the city unexplored. If anyone recommended a doctor in another city, we went there as well. But all we encountered was disappointment. Eventually, a relative suggested trying a homeopathic doctor. They said, "Another child with a similar issue began to see after treatment from this doctor. He's very skilled. You'll see, your daughter will also start seeing." This gave me a new ray of hope, and I pursued that path. Years went by like this. Later, we even started spending money on herbalists and tantrics. By the time my daughter turned 14, she still couldn't see. My husband's entire salary would go toward Pinky's treatment, leaving us unable to save anything for our old age. Pinky was now growing into a young woman and was becoming so beautiful that I hesitated to look at her for too long, fearing I might jinx her. Our neighbors often praised her beauty, saying, "Sheila's daughter Pinky is so gorgeous. If only she could see, she would already be receiving marriage proposals." Hearing such remarks broke my heart, and I was left feeling helpless and sorrowful. I wasn't that old, but due to taking excessive stress, wrinkles had started appearing on my face, making me look older than my actual age. One day, a strange incident happened to us. We had taken our daughter to a traditional healer. He gave my daughter something to eat and assured us that in a few days, she would start seeing again. We paid the healer his fees and were about to leave. As we stepped outside, something unusual occurred. Right in front of us, an 18-year-old boy was riding his bicycle when a speeding car hit him and sped away. The young boy fell to the ground, and blood was gushing from his head. Mukesh quickly ran to the boy and called for help from the people standing nearby, but no one came forward to assist. After much effort, a rickshaw puller agreed to take the boy to the hospital. We took him to the hospital, where the doctors began treating him. I then returned home with my daughter, while Mukesh stayed at the hospital with the boy all night. When Mukesh came back, he told me that the boy's condition was critical and he had slipped into a coma. The boy had no belongings on him that could help identify him or inform his family about his condition. I prayed a lot for the boy. I couldn't stop thinking about which mother's son he might be and how worried his mother would be for him. Over the next few days, my husband kept visiting the hospital. The boy's treatment continued for a month. Once he showed some improvement, my husband brought him home. The boy's head was still bandaged. I glared at my husband as he left the boy in the guest room. He said, "Sheila, this boy has regained consciousness, but he has lost his memory. The doctor has said that they are discharging him, and with continued treatment, his memory will eventually return. Until then, I didn't see any other option but to bring him here. Where else could he go? No one from his family has come forward yet, and it seems no one is even looking for him. I've been deeply worried about him, so I brought him home. He has remembered his name, though. He says his name is Vihan." My husband seemed very troubled, and I looked at him and said, "Mukesh, don't you realize that we have a grown-up daughter at home?" He replied, "The boy is still unwell. By the time he recovers, I'll find some other place for him." I nodded silently. I felt sympathy for the boy too, seeing his condition, so I also started caring for him. Vihan was a very polite boy, and I often thought that if God had given me another child, a son, perhaps my family would feel complete. Maybe my son would have been like him. Whenever I helped him with anything, he would smile and thank me. As for my daughter, Pinky, Vihan never even looked at her inappropriately. His decency deeply impressed me. A month passed like this, and Vihan slowly started walking again. One day, I was watching TV in my room, and Pinky was asleep at that time. Vihan came into my room and asked, "Auntie, may I ask you something?" I replied, "Yes, of course. Ask whatever you want." He hesitated a little and then said, "Auntie, why does it seem like your daughter cannot see? Don't you think you should do something about her eyesight since she is now grown up?" Hearing this, tears welled up in my eyes. I said, "Son, my daughter is blind. She cannot see." Vihan's eyes widened in shock. I continued, "She has been undergoing treatment since she was 4 years old. Now she is 15, but nothing has helped." Vihan nodded and said, "Auntie, if no treatment has helped, why haven't you stopped it yet? Maybe if you accepted it as God's will, you might have found peace by now." Hearing this, I became furious. I shouted at him, "How dare you say that? Pinky is my only child. I will keep trying to cure her until my last breath, no matter what. She is my daughter after all, and we are even treating a stranger like you, aren't we? Not only that, but we have also given you a place to stay and are treating you like family. Perhaps you don't remember, but we saw you get hit by a speeding car right in front of our eyes. No one came forward to help you, and your chances of survival were slim. My husband saved you. Should we have left you there to die? And now that you've lost your memory, we don't even know how long your treatment will take. Should we stop treating you, thinking it's God's will, and throw you out of the house? Even with a grown daughter in the house, we gave you a place to stay." Vihan's words hit me straight in the heart, because no one had ever said such a thing to me before. How could a stranger, who had no idea how much pain I endured seeing my daughter suffer, offer me such advice? I was so angry that I kept speaking without thinking. Vihan's face turned pale. He said, "Auntie, I never meant to hurt your feelings. If my words upset you, I sincerely apologize." I was feeling much better now, and as for my memory, it was gradually returning. But until then, I didn't want to remain a burden on your family. I must leave. I know you live in a respectable and decent neighborhood, and you also have a grown-up daughter. People don't take long to spread rumors, so I'm leaving. I can't face Uncle and leave because he will try to stop me. Please thank him on my behalf. If fate allows, I will meet you all again. Staying with you has been a wonderful experience." Saying this, Vihan got up and left. I was still sitting in anger, wondering why Vihan had said such a thing to me, that I should accept my daughter's condition as God's will. Why didn't he console me instead? Why didn't he say, "Auntie, your daughter will definitely recover one day, and I admire a mother like you who hasn't given up hope yet"? Why didn't he appreciate how I had neglected my own needs and given my all for my daughter's treatment? These thoughts kept swirling in my mind, and I couldn't stop crying. A little later, my daughter woke up and seemed worried. I asked her, "What's wrong?" She said, "Mom, it feels like Vihan Bhaiya isn't in the house. Where has he gone? If he's here, why isn't he talking to me?" I told her, "Dear, you should rest. He must be around somewhere." I brushed it off and went about my chores. But my daughter kept asking about Vihan, so I finally said, "He has recovered and gone back to his family. He won't come to our house again." I noticed my daughter immediately became sad. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she said, "Mom, Vihan Bhaiya shouldn't have left like this. He didn't even say goodbye to me." My daughter had grown attached to him because he used to talk to her. Saying this, she went to her room. After she left, I started coming to my senses and felt immense regret. How could I have treated that boy so harshly that he left our home? If my husband found out, he would be very upset, and Vihan's departure had already made my daughter sad. I was feeling extremely troubled. When my husband came home from work that evening, the first thing he asked about was Vihan. Panicked, I said, "Vihan regained his memory, so he went back to his family." The disappointment in my husband's eyes was evident. He said, "Sheila, I didn't expect this from Vihan. Did you say something to him?" I got nervous and avoided his gaze. Mukesh continued, "Sheila, I had grown very fond of that boy. He felt like my own son. Well, it's good he recovered. He was bound to go back to his family one day, but I'll always regret that he didn't say goodbye to me before leaving. I hope he is happy wherever he is." I walked away to the kitchen. A few days passed like this, and Mukesh never brought up Vihan again. He had a good habit of not making me feel overly guilty. He always tried to forgive my mistakes and ignore them. However, I couldn't stop worrying about Vihan. He was such a good boy, and his behavior showed that he belonged to a well-educated and respectable family. Pinky, too, became very quiet after Vihan left, and I could clearly see the change in her. I couldn't understand why she was so affected. The house had fallen into a state of sadness. One day, my husband's younger sister came to visit us. She lived in Bijnor and had come to stay for 2 days. That day, she was supposed to leave by 4 p.m. She told me, "Bobby, do you know there's a renowned tantric from Bijnor currently in your city? He has come here to solve people's problems. He is very experienced and old. His treatments are so effective that even hopeless people start believing in miracles. Mutes start speaking, and the blind start seeing. He charges a bit more, but his work is excellent. And you've already spent so much on Pinky's treatment. You should give this a try. I'm hopeful that Pinky will be able to see with his treatment." Hearing this, I felt a glimmer of hope after so long. It felt like a ray of light in the darkness. I asked, "Kajal, is this tantric really so effective that my daughter will regain her sight?" She replied, "Bobby, he is very famous in Bijnor, and he's only here for a month. Before he leaves, you should consult him. I'm sure he can help Pinky. Do you know my co-sister didn't have children for 9 years after her marriage? After consulting this tantric, she gave birth to a daughter." Hearing this gave me renewed hope. I took all the details about the tantric from Kajal. By 4 p.m., she left with her husband to return to Bijnor. When my husband came home from the office, I told him about the tantric that my sister-in-law Kajal had mentioned. I said, "Mukesh, today Kajal was telling me about a tantric who has come to our city from Bijnor. Everyone gets cured by his treatment. I want you to come with me so we can take our daughter to him." I had a lot of hope in that tantric. However, Mukesh's behavior regarding the tantric seemed a bit strange. He didn't seem pleased about it. I insisted, "Mukesh, don't worry about the money. I'll sell my jewelry if needed, but I will get our daughter treated." Mukesh replied, "Sheila, have I ever cared about money? I am worried because we have given our daughter so many medicines and tried countless remedies, but nothing has worked so far. I am afraid that this might cause more problems for her in the future." In Mukesh's words, I could see Vihan's face. He was talking exactly like him. I got up angrily and said, "I don't care. You will leave the office early tomorrow and take me to that tantric. That's final." Things will happen the way I want them to. I knew very well that Mukesh never went against my wishes. He lived up to my expectations. The next day, he took early leave from the office and came home promptly. At 4 p.m., we took our daughter to the tantric. Surprisingly, Pinky was refusing to come with us that day. She said, "Mom, I'm tired of getting treated again and again. I don't want to go anywhere anymore. Whatever flaw I have within me, I have accepted it. Please let me be." Hearing this, tears welled up in my eyes. I folded my hands before her, pleading, "Daughter, give me one last chance. After this, I won't ask you to go anywhere." She finally agreed, and we went to the tantric's shop. When we reached, the crowd there was overwhelming. It seemed like it would take a long time for our turn. I looked at my husband and said, "See how many people are here. They wouldn't come here if it were a waste of time. These people must be benefiting, that's why they are here." My husband also observed the crowd carefully and nodded. There was still a long wait, as the queue was incredibly long. It was 7 p.m. when our turn finally came. When we approached the tantric, we put Pinky forward and explained, "Our daughter has been blind since birth. We want her to regain her eyesight so she can see the world." As soon as the tantric saw my daughter, a strange smile appeared on his face. He smiled and said, "Sister, you have brought your daughter to the right place. Your daughter is very special to me, and I want to treat her in a special way. Unlike others whom I treat here, I will come to your home to treat her. Please give me your address so I can take my time and properly work on her treatment." My husband wrote down our home address on a slip and handed it to him. The tantric looked at me and said, "Sister, soon your daughter's eyesight will return. After that, you must tell everyone about me so that more people can come to me and heal. Keep your house doors open tomorrow. I will come to your home." I came back home very happily, but my husband Mukesh seemed a bit upset. He said to me, "Sheila, I don't think this tantric is trustworthy. He seems like a fraud to me just by looking at him." I scolded him and said, "Mukesh, you're too much. What behavior of his have you seen that makes you think he's a fraud already? You didn't believe in him from the start. If you keep thinking like this, how will our daughter get treated?" Mukesh replied, "All right, fine. Do whatever you think is right." I firmly instructed Mukesh not to tell anyone in the neighborhood about the tantric coming to our house to treat our daughter. I said, "If people find out, they'll start coming to our house, and our daughter's treatment won't happen properly." Mukesh understood my point well, and I was very happy thinking that my daughter would soon be cured. I told my daughter, "When you get better, we'll go out together. I'll take you shopping, to the movies, and to the park." Hearing this, she smiled and said, "Mom, I also want to see everything and know what the world looks like." I comforted her and said, "You will be completely fine." My daughter, too, wished to be cured and see the world with her own eyes. Meanwhile, I had told Mukesh to get some snacks and a few food varieties from the market. I wanted the tantric to eat and snack at our home. Mukesh brought the items, and now we were just waiting for the tantric to arrive. I left the doors of our house open. At exactly 6 p.m., the tantric arrived with another man, who seemed to be his assistant. I led the tantric to the guest room and said, "Please have some tea and snacks first, and then we'll have dinner." He smiled and replied, "No, I'll start your daughter's treatment first. After that, we'll all eat together. Where is your husband? Call him to this room as well." I brought Mukesh into the room too. The tantric made Pinky sit in front of him. He took out 2 small paper packets from his bag and then said to me, "Go and bring 2 glasses of plain water." I quickly brought the 2 glasses of water. The tantric poured the contents of both packets into the glasses and said, "Now, you both, husband and wife, drink this water. After drinking it, you must blow on your daughter's eyes." I drank the water in one go, but my husband Mukesh gagged after just 1 sip and said, "This tastes awful." The tantric replied, "What is this behavior? I came here to treat your daughter, and you're fussing over drinking this water. Many people drink much worse for the happiness of their children." I glared at Mukesh and said, "Drink it quickly." Helplessly, he finished the glass in one go. Moments later, I began feeling dizzy, my head grew heavy, and I started to lose balance. I looked over at my husband and saw that he, too, was feeling the same. His head was heavy, and he was swaying. But the tantric was standing there, laughing at us. The tantric suddenly grabbed my daughter's hand, pulling her toward him. He tried to drag her closer while my daughter screamed, "Mom! Dad! Help me!" She was crying and trying to free herself. She even tried to run, but the tantric's assistant caught hold of her other hand. Through my fading vision, I saw a monstrous look on the tantric's face. My head spun, and everything went dark as I completely lost consciousness. Even as I slipped into unconsciousness, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread for my daughter, realizing she was in grave danger. Her desperate screams for help echoed in my ears, but I was powerless to do anything. I don't know how long my husband and I remained unconscious. When I regained consciousness, I sat up in panic, screaming and calling out for my daughter. My daughter, feeling her way with her hands, came close to me, and I embraced her tightly. She was in terrible condition. Seeing her like that made my body tremble uncontrollably. Out of fear, she couldn't speak and just kept crying. Her clothes were torn, and she was visibly shaken, crying inconsolably. I quickly woke Mukesh and began looking around for the tantric. But when I stepped out of the room, I saw that the tantric and his assistant were tied to chairs in the hall. I turned to my daughter and asked, "What happened, dear?" By then, Mukesh had also regained consciousness. Moments later, several police officers entered our house. They arrested the tantric and his assistant and took them away. Standing behind them was Vihan. Seeing him, I froze in shock and asked, "Vihan, how did you get here?" "What happened?" He replied, "Auntie, when I came to your house yesterday, you were going somewhere. I followed you on my bike and trailed you to the tantric's shop. I waited outside for you, but you didn't notice me. Then I got a call from home and had to leave. But I overheard your conversation about the tantric coming to your house the next day to start Pinky's treatment. I went back home, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had a bad feeling about this tantric. He wasn't a good man. He was a fraud who cheated people and harmed young girls. I found out he was kicked out of Binor for his fraudulent activities. I decided to keep an eye on him. If he did anything wrong at your house, I planned to immediately call the police. So, I climbed over your wall and entered your house to watch what was happening. I saw everything the tantric was doing to you. After he drugged you and Uncle Mukesh, I called the police. When he and his assistant began forcing themselves on Pinky, my friend and I intervened. We overpowered them and tied them to chairs. God protected Pinky. I reassured her not to be afraid because her brother was here now. I tried to wake both of you, but you remained unconscious. Then, when you finally woke up, the police arrived and arrested them. Hearing Vihan's words, I broke down, crying uncontrollably. I said, "Vihan, please forgive me. May God bless you. Today, you saved our honor and my daughter's life." Vihan replied, "Auntie, I know you were upset with me that day. But the truth is that God had a reason for not giving Pinky her eyesight. You should accept his will as your own and surrender to it. Everyone has exploited you, but what was the result? Pinky still hasn't gained her sight, right?" Crying, I said, "No one has ever spoken to me the way you just did. People only ever advised me to consult doctors, tantrics, or healers, and I blindly followed their advice. As a mother, I was willing to do anything for my child's happiness, but no one ever told me that I should accept God's will and be content with it. Please forgive me." I folded my hands in front of Vihan, but he quickly held them and said, No, Auntie, please don't do this. You are like a mother to me." I also sought forgiveness from God. My husband was equally happy to see Vihan and thanked him sincerely. Then Vihan shared how he had regained his memory. He told us that after leaving our house, he encountered his grandfather and father, who had been searching for him, thinking he was dead. They were overjoyed to find him alive and well, and took him home. While staying with them, Vihan gradually began to recognize everyone, and over time, his memory fully returned. However, even after regaining his memory, he never forgot us. He remembered how we had saved his life and welcomed him into our home. Vihan later introduced us to his family, who were highly educated and very kind-hearted. They were also quite wealthy. Vihan accepted my daughter, Pinky, as his sister, and my husband treated Vihan like his own son. It felt as if the void of having a son in my life was filled with Vihan's arrival. Our families grew close, and we maintained a warm relationship. My daughter always treated Vihan as her elder brother. Years passed, and my daughter turned 20. Vihan's aunt took a great liking to Pinky and proposed her son's alliance for my daughter. The best part was that the boy, like Pinky, had a disability. He couldn't speak. Both of them had their own shortcomings, which made them value and understand each other even more. I happily got my daughter married to Vihan's cousin. Pinky is now very happy in her marital home, where she is surrounded by loving and caring people. It seems God had planned it this way. Both Pinky and her husband had their own challenges, which brought them together. They never looked down on each other and supported one another unconditionally. Today, both of them are living a beautiful life together. Since my daughter's wedding, I've been at peace, knowing she has a wonderful family who takes great care of her.